Hello, folks. Galen Clavio here. Welcome back to CrimsonCast. It is the midway point of August, Friday, August 15th, as we get ever closer to the start of football season here in Bloomington. It's coming up fast, and we're looking forward to it. IU football getting underway in roughly 2 weeks. On the 30th of August, as they'll be taking on Old Dominion at Memorial Stadium. Should be quite an event. We got a special guest with us, Rick Bozich, joining us on the show, and we'll have him on here in just a second. But Rick, great to see you. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm eager for football to start too. It was a good week this week with the AP poll coming out, and I'm reading all. It's the end of the list season. We're the 25 best coaches, the tiers, ranking the coaches by tiers, the hot seat lists, the up and comers, the frauds, all the other lists, and it does seem to me that Curt Cignetti has earned the respect of most of the national media. I won't throw Matt Hayes or Paul Feinbaum or some of the SEC mafia in there, but most sensible people have realized that he's really a good coach.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that in particular coming up on the show. I'm looking forward to that part of the conversation. Before we get to that point, just a couple quick reminders, folks. If you haven't yet and you're going to be in town for the Kennesaw State game, come a little bit early on Friday and join us at the Buskirk-Chumley Theater for a night of football talk and fun. Starting at 7 o'clock, CrimsonCast Live, myself, Scott, some special guests who we're going to announce here soon, going to be joining us at the Buskirk-Chumley for a live podcast. We've been talking about doing this. We've done a couple of these before at some places in town. We've done them at Upstairs. We've done them at Switchyard when it was alive. Let's pour one out for Switchyard. But we wanted to try something a little bit different, so we're going to take it to the stage. Tickets are on sale. You can buy them through the Buskirk-Chumley Theater. We've got a link down in the description on the podcast. Love to see you out there. Again, that'll be 7 o'clock on Friday, September 5th. Also, just wanted to remind you folks, we're brought to you by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. If you didn't hear the news, Home Field's got their first brick and mortar store, and it is right down the street from where my office is on Kirkwood Avenue. Home Field at Tracks, believe it or not, open already. They're going to have their grand opening next week, but you can walk in there right now. I was just down there yesterday. Our buddy Mason Williams was in town for a little bit, so I made sure to take him down there. All your favorite IU Home Field apparel stuff in one convenient location, and of course, always available online. You can use the code HOME23 and get 15% off your first Home Field apparel order. The IU football box is out. The black IU football bomber jacket dropped yesterday and went like hotcakes. I think there may be still a few left up there. But get over to homefieldapparel.com or visit the brick and mortar store and get your Home Field apparel for the IU football season. We will be working with them throughout the course of the year, have some fun things, I think, planned that we'll be talking about here in the upcoming weeks. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Rick, first of all, wanted to say congratulations. You announced your retirement from professional sports writing earlier this summer. And I wanted to start off by saying congratulations and thank you for all the great insights and the reporting over the many years that you've been covering, not just IU, but sports across the country. What's it feel like now being on the other side and being part of the civilian population again? I guess let's maybe start there.
It's felt very relaxing. It's been good to be a consumer of news and not as much of a producer of news and have that daily pressure of what am I going to come up with? What am I going to write about? I tell the story that the day I knew it was really the right thing to do, that it was the day Sly Stone died. I already knew I was going to do it, but, I'm wondering, is this really what I want to do? And I already written something, maybe two things that day. I'd already taped something for TV. I did one other thing. I came home. I was a big Sly fan. I actually saw him in Assembly Hall in the 70s when I was a student. And I just laid down and was reading about Sly and listening to some of his music. And I started getting these text messages that Vince Morrow was leaving Kentucky football to go work for Jeff Brom in Louisville. Can you chase this down? I was like, I really don't want to, but it's my job, so I'm going to. And it's like, it's time the business has gotten such that, your time can be taken away from you at any time.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to be done with that part of it. But mainly just gratitude for a tremendous journey, all the different people I've got to meet and encounter over the years, all the people that helped me. And, I've always had a tremendous sense of gratitude to IU. I came to IU in 1971 from Maryville, right outside Gary. I grew up in Gary and then moved to Maryville, and really thought I wanted to be a sports writer, but got a late start in doing it, and got a great education at IU, got a job at IU from IU off Marge Blewett's job board in Ernie Pyle Hall. There was a index card up on the board. The Anderson Bulletin is looking for a sports writer for $130 a week. And drove up there on my own, and I don't think anybody else wanted the job, so I got it. And Bob Hammel brought me back to Bloomington. I worked for him for a year and a half, and that's been a sad part of the summer.
Yeah.
Bob passed away, obviously, and then I've been in Louisville for 47 years. So, I mean, I'm just very lucky to have the career that I had.
I was going to mention the Bob Hammel news, which we hadn't really had a chance to talk about. He passed away while I was out on vacation, but it's hard to really put into words like how impactful and important Bob Hammel was, not just in the lives of fans who he was their interpreter and the reporter, for all of those championship seasons for basketball at IU, but he was really just tremendously important to sports writers and sports coverage in general in the state of Indiana for so many years. I mean, you obviously dealt with him a lot and got a chance to learn from him. Like what sticks out to you about Bob Hammel and the impact that he had?
First, his work ethic was second to none. I mean, a lot of times he would go to football games. If it was a Saturday afternoon football game, he would write a 30-inch game story, a 25-inch column, a sidebar, maybe two sidebars, and a notes column. And he was just unbelievably prolific. And during the season, he wrote every day of the week. And when I first got to Bloomington, there were actually two papers, the Bloomington Herald Telephone and the Courier Times. And Bob Hammel, I think, was very instrumental in putting the other paper out of business because his coverage of IU was so much better than the Courier Times. And, he had a good staff where they covered high school sports really strongly. And he had back in the day it was different. In every town, there was usually like one primary sports writer. Bob Hammel, was in Bloomington. Paul Horning was actually the name of the guy in Columbus, Ohio. Bruce Ramey was in Lafayette. Lauren Tate, who's still around, was in Champaign, Illinois. And Bob Hammel was the go-to guy for IU stuff. And, he not only covered football and basketball, but he was one of the best swimming writers in the country because the mid-'70s were the glory years for IU football. And he was actually at the Munich Olympics when a lot of people thought Mark Spitz put on that all-time amazing performance, but because he was Jewish, he was in jeopardy when the hostages took over, and Hammel wrote some great stuff from there. So Bob is just a legend. And, his relationship with Bob Knight they were best friends. And if I told the story before, I apologize, but I covered Edgewood High School for a while, and I was in there on a Saturday night. And a lot of times Bob Knight would come in the HT office to pick up Bob Hammel, and they would go either to a high school basketball game or go out and get a piece of pie and some ice cream. And he was waiting for Hammel to finish up, and I was writing my story about the Edgewood Mustangs, and there was this very intimidating 6'4" figure behind my back. And this was back in the days of IBM Selectric typewriters. And I was writing my story about the Edgewood Mustangs, and this left hand reached down and snatched the paper out of the typewriter, wadded it up, threw it in the trash, and said, "That might be the worst story I've ever bleeping read." And I turned and I looked, and it was Knight. I was like, oh my gosh. And then he patted me on the back and handed me a blank sheet of paper, and he goes, "I'm just kidding, kid."
Wow. that sums a lot of things up in one anecdote.
Yes, it does. Yeah. He also put me in, if I told this, in the early days, he would let the Daily Student fly in the team plane to road trips.
Wow.
And so one year I went to a trip that was going to be at Iowa, on Saturday and Minnesota on Monday. And it was not long after the first major story on Night and IU appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It was a picture of John Laskowski shooting a layup. IU was undefeated that year, the 75 team. And it went back through the Hawaii trip. And Curry Kirkpatrick, legendary basketball writer, had all these cracks in there at night, called him a rampaging martinet, and said that the players, when in Honolulu, were kept in their rooms and dined on bread and water. And that night, when he was angry, would howl at the moon and all this stuff. I still remember all the language. And when we got to Iowa, the bus took us from the airport to the hotel, and the bags were underneath the bus. And I came out to get my bag from under the bus, and Knight wrapped me around in a headlock and started giving me a Dutch rub. And I said, he goes, "Who's your favorite sports writer?" And fortunately, for the one time in my life, I had a quick quip ready. I said, "Not Curry Kirkpatrick." And he laughed, and he told Larry Sherfick, the student manager, he goes, "Make sure he has the best room in the hotel." And I actually ended up with a room that had a water bed. So
it's wow.
I've got so many night stories. We'll never go anywhere else. But, just to be around. Of course, it was the football coach at the time.
Right.
And he would let the Daily Student reporter come in every Monday afternoon, sit and talk to him one-on-one every week. And it was like, here's Knight, here's Corso. How lucky can you be that your first exposure to big-time college athletics are dealing with these two guys?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Just that is a great example of what I was going to ask you next, which is how much has changed in the industry and the way the relationship between media and teams and coaches. I mean, it's felt fundamentally different for a while. I mean, I got to campus as a student in the late 90s. It had already fundamentally changed by that point, but it's even more now to this point where they almost feel like they're on different planets.
Yeah, that's been one of the more discouraging things. I think back, part of it is generational, because I can't relate to the younger people as much because I'm older and they're younger. But I mean, you don't get the access to them in terms of actually one-on-one competition or interactions and interviews. And Knight used to have an open locker room early in his time at IU. I mean, we were able to go in there. Louisville had an open locker room until Patino left, and so did football. Schnellenberger would get mad at you. He called me up one day and said, "Where were you today?" And I said, "I was at home. I had something to do." He goes, "Why weren't you at practice?" I said, he goes, "That's not a good excuse. The New York Times, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel were at practice today, and the Louisville Courier-Journal wasn't." It's like, "Okay, coach, I'll be there tomorrow." But anyway, what you're saying is now it's all the interactions with you are really staged or formal. And when you got 3 guys sitting up at a podium and 20 guys in the room, you're really not going to get very quality material. Or in the old days, you can go in the locker room. And if you did it on a consistent basis, you got to know players and they knew who you were, and they could trust you or not trust you and tell you things sometimes off the record or share parts about their personality. So I was able to, I knew Jeff Brom as a player. So when he came here as a coach, I have a relationship with him. I don't think Scott Satterfield ever knew my name. Chris Mack kept everybody at arm's distance. Lamar Jackson was at Louisville, won the Heisman Trophy. We never got a single one-on-one interview with him ever. And it's not any different than at Kentucky or, at Indiana, it's a little bit better after the football games where they bring the players in the weight room and you can talk to them individually. But at basketball, I know they had that event a month ago, which was nice, and hopefully it'll be better under DeVries. But under Woodson, it wasn't much. It's no fun to cover the team because it's just so it's all programmed.
Yeah, it's one of those things that has been lost in the shuffle, and I think especially for the average consumer, they really don't grasp a lot of that. But it's a lot more organizationally adversarial is probably how I would put it.
Yeah,
because it's like a combination of things. And this was really taken shape in the 90s in a lot of places where universities and athletic departments are very concerned about their image, and their way of addressing that is to try to keep the content and the contact to a minimum. But it's also now an era where a lot of universities, athletic departments, like, well, we can create our own content.
Correct. They don't need us.
They don't need the media in the same way, which just changes fundamentally the way that the relationship works.
Absolutely. You feel it every way. Every time you go to an event, there's less access. I mean, I remember when I first started covering Kentucky at Rupp, we were almost center court on the floor. And then we got moved to the baseline. And then we got moved back farther. And then for about 10 or 15 years, we were in the overhang before the first and second deck. And last year, they moved us all the way up in the corner in the upper arena, as far away as you can be. And it was like, I ended up just watching the game on TV in the press room because I could see it better. And I was like, why am I here? What am I doing here? I can do this from home.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways that's how they want it, because we're sort of an inconvenience. We get in the way, or we're an expense, or however you want to see it. But that's the way of the world. Even North Carolina, which had great access for a while, I heard they moved the media up to the upper level of the Smith Center. So, they can sell those tickets for so much money.
Right.
And considering how much money they have to come up with, I can't blame them.
I remember being a freshman at IU broadcasting for WIUS in an exhibition game against Athletes in Action, and our seats were 50, 51, and 52 right at the end of press row, which was right on the court. That was a wild experience as a freshman to be sitting, at courtside broadcasting a game. And that's just something that you don't have the option of doing in most cases because of what you just said. I mean, the seats, I think they converted those seats over to actual seats that they sold around 2002, 2003, somewhere in that range. And that's pretty much happened everywhere. It's certainly not a thing that's unique to IU. So,
no, I mean, IU's better than most. I mean, they've got still some seats there behind the benches. Used to be 3 rows there. I don't know if you ever knew that. Now it's 1, but it's been 1 for quite a while.
I've seen some old video clips that I might have posted on YouTube. Absolutely.
You could hear Knight pretty well. I was sitting there the day he slapped Joe Hall in the back of the head. You coach your team and I'll coach mine. I still remember that. And one time I was sitting near a guy by the name of Charlie Foudy, who was a retired Big Ten basketball official. And Knight didn't like the way the game was being called. And he stood there for like 10 seconds as the game was going on and just stared at Charlie Foudy and then said, "Your officials, blah, 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 suck." You could hear it all, man. It was great.
Wild. Well, let's talk IU football first. We'll come back to basketball in a second, but let's talk first about last year. I don't know that you and I ever got a chance to really recap what a season that was and how it's almost like landing on an alien planet. If you've been following IU football for as long as the two of us have, what was your just trying to process everything that happened and the way that it occurred all last year and what it led to? I mean, what was your perspective on all of that?
I liked the way Cignetti approached it all in terms of, I'm going to just be myself and say what I think and say what I believe. And if I ruffle some feathers, I don't care. I got to change the mindset here. I've got to make people believe that this is serious. And I just talked about Schnellenberger. It was similar to what Schnellenberger did when he came to Louisville, of like, you people need to quit thinking about football the way you've been thinking about it, because that ain't going to work. And that's the only way it was going to work at IU. And I listened to your podcast, to you and Scott, frequently when I'm walking my Labrador. And I remember I was walking in the neighborhood one day about this time of year when you guys were doing the game by game. And I think you got out to maybe 8-0. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, I love you guys. I love the way you talk about IU football in a serious manner, in a way that not many other people have for a number of years. You and Taylor, and in the old days, Punt John Punt. I was part of I always felt like a certain segment of the media, like, yeah, they'll take football serious until basketball starts. But you guys didn't do that. And I thought, I love your optimism, man, but this is IU football. I've seen too much. I can't say 8-0. And so I figured, yeah, they're not gonna win at the Rose Bowl. I know UCLA stinks, but they're not gonna go out there and win. And when I watched that game, it was like, hey, this is interesting. And then it kept going. It was like, never were behind. always making big plays, exciting to watch. And I think I came up, I don't know whether it was Nebraska, which was 56-7, or Maryland, which was a closer game. And I was like, this is a real football team. This isn't a fluke. And then to watch it all the way to the end, I was at the Ohio State and Notre Dame games, and they weren't good enough on the offensive line to win those games. But it was just a once in a lifetime experience that I think the best part for me was to come to games and to see it look like a college football game should look. Tailgating, packed parking lots, excited people in the stands before the game kicks off, expectations of winning, talk of the town, talk of the talk radio, talk around the water cooler of like Gus Johnson said, IU has a football team. And I don't remember the rest of the statement, but he said it on a telecast. IU has a football team and they're really good or something like that. I was like, that's it.
Yeah. It was obviously wild to be there in the middle of it as well. And
why did you believe, though? I mean,
honestly, the schedule looked like it was just favorable enough, and you just felt like a different energy was in the building. And I think that's probably the thing that sticks out to me the most as I try to go back, because I think about this all the time. We made the predictions, and I'm always, you've heard podcasts in the past where we've over predicted wins. And I've always got that in the back of my head. One of my coworkers, heard that and wrote his own prediction for what the beginning of the season was going to be. And it was like 3-3 instead of the 6-0 we'd predicted, and put it on a Post-it note. I put it up on my computer screen just to remember. But you could feel like the approach was different. I think you summed it up nicely. The idea, and I remember hearing this happening with Schnellenberger at Miami as well, because Miami was not good before he took over. And it was really just a total mindset shift. And what struck me as I listened to him talk more, and as you started to see those early games and his reaction even to like the students leaving at halftime of that first game, it's like, all right, there's actually something here. And my big question, even when I made the predictions, was, are these James Madison transfers really going to be able to come in and not just compete at the Big Ten level, but transfer that personality, that team spirit? And it was clear very early on, even I think in fall practice, that was happening. So that was really where it came from. I expected, hey, they'll get off to a great start, maybe 6-0. Maybe in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, they'll probably stumble down the stretch because it's a team that has a lot of holes and a lot of question marks, and they had just gone with 3-9 the previous season. It was a real surprise when it kept rolling. And, even with the Ohio State loss and then not being really what they needed to be at Notre Dame, you just can't help but look back at the dominance they had in so many of those wins and say that was one of those unique singular seasons in college football that rarely happens. And we probably didn't even fully appreciate it as it was happening at the time.
I don't think there's any question. I mean, even really good teams aren't that dominant over similar type schedules. Rarely. I can't remember a team that was that dominant like that. And, I'm old enough to remember the 67 team, which is until last year, maybe the gold standard for IU. And they were lucky to win a bunch of games. I mean, they pulled a lot of games out in the fourth quarter, 12-10 or 14-12 or whatever it was. I mean, this team left no doubt. And I know that there was a lot of criticism of the schedule, and that at some point that's not surprising. But I mean, if you look, Washington and Michigan were just in the national championship game the year before. They're well-established programs with great tradition and have recruited at a high level. And to beat those teams the way they did, especially Washington, that's impressive. To beat Nebraska, which is on the uptick with Matt Rule and had the nation's best freshman quarterback the way they did, impressive. So, I think that a lot of the criticism was from people that never really watched an IU football game. I don't think they didn't watch an IU football game until they played Ohio State. And then they saw what happened with the fumbled punt and all that stuff. And I told you they weren't any good. Go back and watch the entire season of when they were playing other legitimate Big Ten programs and just dominated them. And Joel Klatt knew that they were legit. People that really dug in and watched film knew that they were legit.
Yeah. As I always bring up, the same media organization and ESPN that has been hammering the strength of schedule thing. FPI, if you go look at the website right now from last year, Indiana's strength of schedule is 35th in the country. Is it top 10? No. Is it the worst? Not by any means. It's not even in the bottom half. It's not in the bottom 2/3 of FBS. Right. And so I think a lot of it is tied to some things that Curt Cignetti has started to emphasize, and I'm glad that he's doing so. No one likes the interloper intruding on the playoff. No one likes programs that don't belong there. And you get a ton of this in college football, this idea of hierarchy. No one likes it when somebody crashes the party. This happened with Kansas State 25, 30 years ago.
Exactly right.
And so I think for IU, it's funny because IU fans are almost too new to college football fandom and taking college football and its landscape seriously to, I think, be offended enough by the dismissive attitudes of people elsewhere in the country. And that's almost a blessing to some degree, I think, for a lot of fans, because they were able to enjoy the season without caring about how other people were trying to put it into context.
And that's what they should do. Enjoy it for as long as it continues, and enjoy this season. Don't be spoiled. This season is highly unlikely to go the way last season went, because that was a once-in-a-lifetime season, really. So enjoy what this one is, what the challenges are, and like the first 3 games look like they're winnable, and then Illinois is a very big game, obviously, and then is Iowa next to Oregon? I can't keep it straight.
It goes Illinois, then Iowa, then a bye, then Oregon.
Okay, so we'll know a lot after that, and Illinois is really getting more preseason hype than Indiana, which is interesting. I guess because they have more players back, that's the reason. More returning players, but considering the games at IU, but that should be the game of the week for sure in the Big Ten, and maybe one of the games. It could be a college game day game.
Yeah, I mean it could be college game day. It could be a prime time on NBC. I mean, it's going to be one of the best games that week, and that's exciting. And I think that's the big thing. You hit on something that I really felt emotionally while I was in the stands, especially for the Nebraska game and the Washington game. I've been coming to Memorial Stadium since my dad would bring me in the 80s when I was a kid. And, we lived up in West Lafayette, ironically. So I saw pretty much every bucket game because that was easy to get to. And we would come occasionally down to 1 or 2 games a year. And outside of 87, when I think I saw the stadium like 80% full for a game, I'd never seen Memorial Stadium feel like not just a legitimate college football environment, but one where Indiana was the reason it felt like a college football environment and its fans. You'd get the Michigan games or the Ohio State games, but the vibe walking into the stadium for that Nebraska game and just the energy that was emanating from that stadium throughout was something I'd never experienced before in there. And I think that's one of those, the first time you experience it in what you consider your home building, it's hard to ever get that feeling back again, which is why I kept telling people last year, like, if you're a fan, you need to savor this, because even if next year is as good, it won't feel as fresh as what it feels like right now.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The first time is always the best.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, I've been fortunate, like I said, to cover games, all different venues across the country. Most of the SEC venues, a lot of Big Ten venues, most of the Big East when Louisville was in that, or the ACC. And last year, Indiana felt like what a college football Saturday should feel like. People got there early. They were out in the parking lot with their grills and their, generators, and watching games on TV and talking about what was going on that weekend, and, trash talking the opposing fans who were going through the parking lot and engaging them. And then in the stadium when the game started, and, we used to laugh about it sitting up in the press box, but in the beginning of the year, it always would start out with a pretty good student population at the games. But then first time they had a bad game, that would be the game they left at halftime and didn't come back. And we didn't see that last year.
No.
And so that's the way it is at a real football place. People don't find excuses to leave. They're just not coming. I mean, wasn't it in the 2000s? I think when my daughter was at IU that, everybody went for the tailgate and didn't go to the game, right? I mean, that area just south of 17th Street was like the biggest party in town. until the game. And then people would stay out there and keep partying when the game started.
I mean,
so they got the tailgating part, but the game was irrelevant.
It stretched well into the 2010s. I mean, it was a problem. And it's one of those things. It's a cultural thing. And, it's like I heard anecdotally from some folks that had kids going through orientation this year, and it had kids go through orientation 3 years ago as freshmen. And, 3 years ago, you're hearing people, they're not mentioning football. Some of them are actively downplaying, like, well, nobody actually goes to the games. And then this year, it's all football. All they're talking about is football, to the point that they're even leaving basketball out of some of the conversations for orientation. I mean, that is that culture shift. And it's just hard to get your head wrapped around that it happens at Indiana. There's no reason why it shouldn't happen at Indiana. It just hasn't happened up to this point, and that is a really cool thing to watch. It's fascinating that Curt Cignetti, just kind of through the power of personality, got so many people kind of believing and on that track. It's one of those things where I always felt like Indiana struggled in football because they didn't realize that they needed a personality who could actually be part of the thing that people rallied around with football. It's what made basketball under Bob Knight such a powerful cultural force. I mean, yes, they won a ton of games, but Knight was the Pied Piper that kind of brought everybody back into the fold for a basketball program that hadn't had a lot of successes over the previous 15 years.
You're exactly right. I remember the Lou Watson, Jerry Oliver years. And, the last year they actually had George McGinnis and Steve Downing and some really good players and didn't make the tournament. And, Knight took over the first year and they went to the NIT and were really good. But yeah, I remember there were a lot of times I would be at Louisville games. When I first covered Louisville, they played an old, dilapidated baseball stadium. And by November, the crowd support would die down. And they'd have 20,000 people at the game. And finally, in the mid-'80s, they said, you know what? We're either going to get serious about football or we're going to de-emphasize football. And fortunately, because of circumstances, Schnellenberger had left Miami and went to the UFL for 1 year. And that franchise went bust. So he was available. He was from Louisville. They have a really strong connection of alums from his high school, which was Flagey High School, where Howard Schnellenberger and a bunch of business leaders in town went, and they recruited him to come back. And he changed the whole mindset. They built a new stadium. They added on to it twice. They jumped from independent to Conference USA to Big East to ACC. It was like, Louisville is actually a legitimate football school. Why can't Indiana do this? Well, the administration under Scott Dolson and Pam Whitten, I guess, decided it was mandatory that they do that because of the new, people talk about football and basketball schools. Everybody's a football school now. If you're not a football school, you're going to be somewhat irrelevant, especially in the Big Ten. And they got the right coach finally. They tried, I can go through the list, them all. They tried the NFL hotshot and Sam Weish. They tried Mallory, who was successful. They tried the former IU offensive coordinator, two-way player, and Cam Cameron. That didn't work. DiNardo, he was a disaster. Every time I watch him on the Big Ten Network talking about IU football, it's like, do people really know what you did at IU football? I mean, I don't think they do, because you were a joke. Then they went to Hepner, who I think would have done a good job. And then it was Bill Lynch.
Yep.
And then it was Kevin Wilson, who I actually give him some credit. He forced the administration to get serious about facilities. And I think he started pushing the ball forward to close it in the stadium. And Fred Glass got it going. But Dolson took it the next step. And, let's see where it goes from here.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. And whether or not this season is as successful as last season, people have been asking, like, what are you going to do if they only win like 8 or 9 games? And I keep saying that's already like a top 5 season in program history. If you win 8 games,
just win the bowl game, man. You got to win the bowl game.
It should be a lot of fun though, all season. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Let's talk basketball. IU, we don't really get a first look at them this past week, but we kind of do. They're down in Puerto Rico and in what is essentially a team building exercise with some scrimmages attached to it, as opposed to an actual trip. Brand new roster. It's been a fascinating summer, but kind of a low key summer for IU basketball, with Darren DeVries coming in. They've had to reset the entire roster. early returns, at least from the Puerto Rico trip, looked promising. There's some interesting players on this team, but IU basketball really does find itself at kind of this fascinating crossroads where it just has not been a great quarter century. And it's almost a program right now that feels like it's trying to reestablish an identity of some sort and reestablish a connection with fans.
Yeah, I agree. People they've gotten a little bit discouraged or disillusioned because they've gotten their hopes up too many times. They believed in Archie Miller, and then that didn't work. Then they believed in Mike Woodson briefly, and that didn't work. So it's like, okay, now you're going to have to show me. I've had the rug pulled out from under me twice before. I've heard all these laudatory things about Archie and Mike, and I want to see evidence. But the thing that's still there and hasn't gone away is, and it was reinforced to me last week, you and Brian and Ryan and might have been Mike, I don't remember who it was, or Coach Bob Moats, did a 4-person pod live stream on a game that none of you saw, and hundreds of people were on there commenting on it. And that only can happen at a place like IU or Kentucky or Louisville or Carolina. People are still hungry to have a good basketball program. And, I like DeVries' credentials. I like the way he's handled things to this part in his career and his part in time in Bloomington. And he's going to play the more modern style of basketball that Mike Woodson promised the last couple of years, but had no possible way of instituting and no interest in instituting.
Yeah, I think that was the most disappointing thing. I think everybody wanted the Woodson era to work, and it wasn't just that it didn't work. I mean, it wasn't a complete disaster in terms of, they beat Purdue more regularly than they had under Archie Miller. They did marginally better at certain things in recruiting, but it constantly felt like you were being told things were much better than they actually were. And then when you tried to point out, well, no, this is actually not up to standard, then it was your problem, not the problem of the team or the coaching staff. And that it's been, I know, very frustrating for a lot of IU fans, to the point that, I think there's reason for optimism, but measured optimism for this year's team. And even that relatively mild messaging is not going over well with people who are very much in, I need to be shown first before I'm going to let myself get talked back into this.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some good signs to see, though. You could just tell there was a lot more energy in recruiting. They were at the events they were supposed to be at. They're trying to they've gotten more guys on campus. They've only got one commitment so far, and he's not a top 100 guy yet, but it seems like they should be able to get a few guys. And, with more of a head start, they might be able to get more higher credential players out of the portal. Not that I'm obsessed with that, because a lot of the higher ranked players of the portal that IU got last year really weren't worth what they were ranked or how much they were allegedly getting in NIL money. But I think Alex and I got a chance to talk to Coach DeVries back in June for about 40 minutes. And I was impressed. He's just a ball coach. I mean, he doesn't try and be a personality. He's not telling one-liners. He's not trying to act like he's got some kind of a business hokum pokum strategy of, like, with acronyms or whatever. It's just like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And we'll see how it works. And so I just thought he was just a straightforward, sincere guy. And I think he'll do fine. It just, people have to be a little bit patient. And patience is not really something that is rewarded in today's world of college sports.
And it's also hard to ask people to be patient when they've been asked to be patient for about 9 years now.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think took away a lot of the faith a number of people had in Mike Woodson, is the number of games where they just weren't competitive.
Yeah.
Just weren't. Kansas, you went there, right?
Yeah. I was there.
Arizona and Las Vegas.
I was there
UConn
too.
in Madison Square Garden. I mean, losing 5 in a row to Nebraska, however many it was, by double figures. Not being able to beat Northwestern. I mean, Mike Woodson can say whatever he wants. I mean, it wasn't IU basketball. And so you got to build that back. It's not going to happen overnight because there's good teams and everybody else is spending money and trying to win in the Big Ten too. And so you've got to just take a step and be, I think this year there'll probably be a bubble team. That would be my guess. I think there'll be a bubble team. And then it's better to have fewer expectations and overachieve. He's not trying to oversell and underdeliver. It's better to underpromise and overdeliver and win some recruits. I mean, I'm fairly convinced if he would have been the coach a year ago, or if Dusty May would have been the coach, that Braylon Mullins would also be here along with Trent Sisley. And that's the kind of stuff that IU fans are looking at and wondering how it goes.
Same thing happened 20 years ago with, you miss out on a lot of recruits during that 2000 to 2005 period. And you see how well they played at other schools. And it always raises questions in the mind. But as you said, you're in place now, you get some good recruits in. It takes a couple of years. These things rarely happen overnight. And obviously a lot of groundwork to be laid, but it does feel like things hopefully are moving in a good direction. So
yeah, I think so. I mean, I like the staff. I mean, Kenny Johnson's a proven assistant coach. Rod Clark did good things at Tennessee. I think that he'll get it done. And I always lean back on this. I mean, Scott Dolson was a former IU basketball manager under Bob Knight, who was there for the 1987 championship team, the last championship team Indiana had. He knows what IU basketball is supposed to be. He knows what the fans want it to be. And I think he will work at getting it back to what it was. And, even the fact this year that Kentucky's back on the schedule, Louisville's on the schedule, they're playing Marquette. I mean, there's some other good signs that I think it's going to get back to the way it used to be. And, I think that people in the Big Ten realize that it's better for the Big Ten when Indiana is good in basketball. Because if IU gets to be good in basketball again, the national publicity will come back to the university very quickly. The fan base is there. I mean, they're just, it's like, okay, you've stepped on my throat a couple of times. You need to give me a little bit more evidence before I buy in.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating thing to watch, and we'll obviously keep an eye on it throughout the course of the year. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you joining us on the show as always. It's a pleasure. Congratulations again on your retirement, and hopefully we'll see you up here at some games, either football or basketball, throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to try and come up to a football game, and I'll definitely come to some basketball games. I started at IU the year that the Assembly Hall and Bob Knight arrived, so I've been to at least one game every year since the building opened. Still have the program from the very first game, December 1st, 1971 against Ball State. And I was there for the game that Knight beat Digger Phelps 94-29. I have a lot of memories in that building, and I enjoy coming up there. I'm going to try to come to some women's games too, because I think I'm very interested to see. This is going to be a fun year to see how they develop. Losing the players they got, but I have a tremendous respect for Terry Moore and the way she's built that program and changed the whole mindset about IU women's basketball. And was last night the official kickoff of the sports season with the women's soccer team? They won 6-1.
Big win against Youngstown State last night. Yes.
I know that you follow it closer than what's the forecast for the men's soccer team?
Top 20? They are top. They're 11th in the opening poll, and they open up against number 9 Clemson next week. So hitting the ground running. And I got a chance to talk to Todd Yeagley earlier on this week, and he seems like pretty good about where the team's at. It's an interesting mix of some newcomers, but some really proven faces from last year as well. So I think the prognosis is pretty good.
Okay. Well, I'll be following them and volleyball. Steve Eric's still trying to get over the hump. I think he's got a top 15 recruiting class and lost some of his better players, I guess, in the portal, but we'll see what he can get done. So if you're a IU fan or IU student, you should go to as many events as you can, because it's a fun time to be a student at IU.
I've been here, as I know you have, at times when the array of sports was not nearly as high level.
Yes.
So yeah, if you're an IU student or even just a fan living in Bloomington and the surrounding area, I'd recommend getting out to some games this year. It should be a lot of fun. So.
Yes, you should. All right.
Rick Bozich, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Galen. I appreciate you.
Good luck
Anytime.
in retirement. We'll be talking to you soon. We'll be talking to you folks soon as well with more coverage of IU sports here on CrimsonCast. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. Stay never daunted. So long, everybody.